We are now into our first hour of the show, and I'm so excited because I have a beautiful and dynamic couple in the studio with me. But before I bring them in, I'm going to share just a little bit about them. I am speaking of the Ma'at. You know, they're coming in, and they're going to speak with us tonight in regards of vulnerability. You know, they are the co-founders of Be International LLC, a multifaceted relationship development business that focuses on life relationship and coaching sessions, premarital counseling, and relationship education classes. They're coming in and they're going to talk to us about this very important subject. You know, I had the opportunity, as I said when I opened up the show, to really begin to see a lot about area in our relationship and marriages. And, you know, to become vulnerable in your relationship, sometimes it is seen as something hard to do, but really it isn't. And I'm excited to have these two lovely people in the studio with me. I believe the Ma'at are in the studio now. Hi, guys. How are you? And welcome to Love Zone Mondays.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. We're so happy to be here. Again, thanks for having us.
And Happy New Year.
You're welcome. Happy New Year to you as well. You know, I'm enjoying the conversation tonight, the topic, which is about vulnerability. But before we jump into that, if you will, of course, you know, I didn't give you bio justice, and I tell you why. We've had the opportunity really to begin to share you with Source Nation and everyone that listens to Love Zone Monday. If you will, please, if you take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, we'll jump into the conversation from there.
Okay, great. Sure, no problem. So my name again is Aiyana, and I work in our business with my husband and partner, Ayize, and we're both therapists and relationship coaches and have done a lot of work with couples primarily and done family work, really helping people to restore relationships and to go to the next level in their own relationships, their intimate relationships. So again, our work has been around counseling and coaching. We've done some speaking and do a lot of creative productions that really, really bring a good awareness and light to couple dynamics and the issues that go on in relationships. And we also have an online presence where we have nice videos on YouTube, as well as a website that has a lot of good resources and information about how to really keep your relationship in a place where it's divorce-proof and you can really be growing and going to the next level. So that's essentially who we are and what we do in a nutshell, and we enjoy it tremendously because you can't do this type of work and not have to look at yourself in the mirror and check yourself at the same time. So we're constantly making sure that we have to challenge ourselves with not just talking the talk but walking the walk as well.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing the information with us. Of course, you know, tonight's conversation is all about vulnerability. And the fact is that a lot of us have difficulty when it comes to being vulnerable in our relationships. Let's start with the number one area. And I think when we look at vulnerability, we need to really stress that communication should be number one. And with communication, you need to be very effective with it. Talk to us about that and what your thoughts are.
Sure. So when it comes to communication and relationships, what we've seen is that people have really struggled around this area of vulnerability because it really requires them to take a risk and expose themselves, really put their guards down and jump into the relationship or just be in a relationship fully present. So when it comes to communicating effectively, in a relationship, we have to recognize that we're all coming into relationships with baggage. You know, we're coming with preconceived notions, we're coming with beliefs, we're coming with just a whole bunch of stuff that Mama and them gave us when we were youth. So with that being said, as we attempt to mature in our relationships, we go through a process of unfolding, if we're doing it correctly, where we consciously and even sometimes unconsciously make a decision to step closer and become more connected with the person that we say we love. But it's absolutely impossible to achieve that level of intimacy where you're extremely close and extremely connected unless you're willing to become and to be vulnerable in a relationship. And so communication definitely helps to facilitate that. And I'm not just speaking about what you're saying verbally, but, you know, those nonverbal cues and how you're communicating through those. definitely impact the level of intimacy and your partner's willingness to be vulnerable with you. You know, if I come in the house and my wife is giving me the stank eye, then that right there is going to have an impact on me and you know, not allow me or give me permission to be vulnerable and be willing to put my guards down and take a risk with her. But if her nonverbal cues are those that are inviting, loving, and she's receptive towards me and whatever I got going on, then I'm more inclined to expose myself and truly get naked with her in an emotional sense so that she can see who I am, how I'm feeling, how my day was, and where I'm trying to go in this relationship. So you need to be present both, you know, with the verbal and nonverbal cues in terms of communication if you expect to achieve any level of intimacy and vulnerability in the relationship.
I love that. I love that, Ayize. The fact that you said that. Now, let's go into the area of just really, like you said in your bio, keep it real, keep it 100. You know, when we look at vulnerability, we have to understand that you got to face reality, meaning you have to put the real facts on the table. Feel free to really discuss all parts of you and what it is that you're thinking. A lot of people have a difficult time in doing that. Talk to us about that, feeling free in your relationship and really revealing the true facts about yourself.
Sure. I think what comes to mind for me, oftentimes in working with folks, what I've discovered, and both my husband and I have discovered, and even looking at our own relationship, you know, folks want to be intimate. They want to have this level of closeness that, you know, when we go to the movies and, you know, we look at these wonderful fairy tales and read books, we think, oh, wow, you know, he totally gets her and she's been made for him and they're soulmates and everything is just so wonderful. And people wonder, you know, is that possible? Is there any part of that that's possible? Even if I know that, you know, that kind of perfection is not really possible in love, you know, is there some piece of that that's possible? And people are really wanting that. But what I have found is that people would rather be safe than satisfied. And
right.
So when it gets to the place where, okay, what is required for me to have that? That means that I have to share something that makes me feel incredibly exposed, even if they're not having that conscious, but I just feel really out there, you know, or it's really outside of my comfort zone. You know, I've never talked to anybody like this. I don't even spend time with myself thinking about why I am the way I am on this particular issue. So for me to spend time with someone that I love sharing that is radical and revolutionary. You know, I can't do it. So I'd rather be safe than be satisfied. And a lot of times what we focus on people is, you know, you can live a life of safety and you can even have a partner and you all both, you know, stretch just as far as you're willing to stretch, but you both have these lines that you operate behind where you are more committed to your own protection and your own agenda than you are to the ultimate edification and growth of your relationship. And so you have these crossroads opportunities, and this is what we usually tell folks, where you know that you're holding back. You know that your body feels stiff. You know that there's thoughts that's going through your mind that you're just not going to share, or you want to choose to walk out of the room instead of stay in the moment. And you can, at those crossroads opportunities, you can make a choice to do something very different. And usually the choice requires that you do something that's opposite of what you would naturally do. And that will pull you towards vulnerability. And in order to be intimate, you have to be vulnerable. There's no intimacy that occurs without vulnerability. And so I think really what folks have to understand is that it's not this fairy tale kind of notion of, oh, you know, they're soulmates and they just feel so free with one another. It takes practice. Everything in relationships and in life takes practice. So when we first start practicing something, it feels very unnatural. It actually doesn't give us any good, yummy feelings. It makes us feel scared. It may even make us feel angry. But as we practice and as we do it more and more, we start to get good at it, and then the results start to come where we actually see some outcomes in our relationship that look like, oh, wow, now that feels really good because I was able to trust that, you know, he would listen to me or that he would be there for me the way I needed because you've already practiced it a few times. So I think folks just have to understand that like anything, it takes work, it takes practice, and it's not going to be all rosy. And like yummy from the beginning. It just don't work like that.
Right. And I love what you just said, Aiyana, practicing with your mate in regards to this area. And, I'm glad that you said that, because this weekend I actually posed a question in one of my groups, one of my single groups, and we talked about, becoming vulnerable in the relationship and how important is it for you to be. And some of the young men in the group were saying to me, I'm not gonna look like a punk. I'm not gonna put all my information out on the table, knowing that she is not going to do the same. I said, well, in a relationship, especially if you're looking for longevity, and here on this platform, we stress that we strive for longevity and success, and I'm going to continue to say this. When you look at the dynamics of the African-American household, and you wonder why the numbers are as high as they are, is because there are a couple of things that we're lacking. We're lacking the fact that we're unable to communicate efficiently and effectively with one another. And also, I think that we lack the area of really understanding how to become vulnerable and how to really begin to talk about your dreams, your passions, your fears, and be able to work together. So I want to say where you are, because you said a word that I really believe in, and this is what I said in the group. You have to begin to trust one another. Trust each other enough to where if you feel as though you're talking about everything in your life, or as people say, I'm telling all my business, then that will be a thought put to the side. Because when you trust each other, then you won't feel as though your business is being put out there. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of trust being an essential component of vulnerability, of establishing or achieving true intimacy in a relationship. It's kind of akin to me, if you can imagine, we've all done like Easter egg hunts, and you may run across the field carrying an egg on a spoon. And so, when you're in a relationship, there's a certain element of delicacy, or a certain amount of delicacy that's required when it comes to nurturing and taking care of your partner's heart. And so just imagine your partner's heart being that egg. Are you going to tend to it with care? Are you going to be gentle with it? Are you going to make sure that you're taking care of it and you're protecting it, and that you're very mindful about what you expose it to, whether it be from you or from people from the outside? And so if that egg or that person's heart feels as though they can trust you, then to some degree you've given them permission to be able to begin to open up and be vulnerable with you. And so even when I look at my relationship with my wife, we've been together for over 20 years, and we've been married for going on 14 now. And it's been a process in our relationship, because it would be foolish, and I repeat that, it would be absolutely foolish for you to jump into a relationship or enter into a relationship completely trusting your partner, because you're exposing yourself unnecessarily, and truth be told, you don't know this person. So it's a graduated process that takes place for you to actually get to a place of arriving at like complete intimacy. And it doesn't happen in 1 year, 5 years. It takes a while to achieve that complete intimacy and total connection. So you learn to trust over time. And I think that you have to be diligent and patient in your process of getting to know your partner, because truth be told, as you're getting to know your partner, you're also getting to know yourself. So if you can't be vulnerable with you, then how do you expect yourself? I mean, how can you expect to be vulnerable with somebody else?
Exactly. I love that. I love that. Because we also talked about, being able to grow. I love the fact that you used your example about you and your wife, the fact that you all have been together for 20 years, and in that 20 years, 14 years of that are married years. And I think that with that being said, that is success. You're striving for success, and you have to have that. To me, and I guess because I've been divorced twice, I have no problem in saying that, but my second marriage, I call that my adult marriage, because I married when I was 22, and at the age of 22, you don't know nothing at 22. I don't care what nobody says. But my adult marriage was at the age of 30, and we were married for 8 years, and I thought that this marriage was going to be the one that was going to last, but unfortunately, it didn't. But what I will say, that marriage taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about who I am as a individual, who I am as a woman, or who I will be as someone's wife. And I think that the thing about it is that we all have made mistakes, but with that being said, are you able to say, I made a mistake and I'm going to learn from this and take it wherever I need to be? So you're growing, and I think when you say to yourself, I'm going to be vulnerable and I'm going to embrace whatever it is, then you're willing to grow. Talk to us about that, growing in vulnerability, growing in your relationship, and it being okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my wife, she wanted to share something about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I what just popped up in my mind when I think about my trajectory. My husband and I got married young, and as I look back at our relationship and I look at myself and the things that I used to do and some of the things I still do and the ways I used to respond and whatnot, I was quite an insecure, very, what's the word I'm looking for? I just was a fragile young wife who did not have really a lot of confidence in who I was, and was trying to figure out who I was, not only, as a young and new wife, but just as a young woman, trying to figure out who I was and what my purpose and role was here. And so I just remember all the time kind of ups and downs in our relationship, and my not really being in a place where I was being vulnerable at all. I would have my little moments of vulnerability, but literally, I was putting up walls left and right, walking around with walls I didn't even know existed. And I guess I'm saying all of this to say that if people don't hold on to the fact that in everything there's a process, and don't allow themselves to get through the muck and mire, then you never ever get to experience the other side. And I talk about that a lot, that there is an other side to conflict, and there is an other side to communication and stress and drama and all of that. I had to, at many points in time, make room for my husband as he was a young man trying to figure out what it means to be a husband and to provide and do all of these things, and he had to make room for me. But if we had just thrown in the towel and, attacked one another and stayed dedicated to our agendas in our corners and never ever took a moment to visit places of vulnerability, and even though we couldn't stay there, we didn't have the emotional capacity to stay in that spot as long as we should have, because we just weren't mature enough. But if we hadn't taken the opportunity to do it here and there, then I know for a fact that we wouldn't be where we are today. And so I think, what folks have to be able to see and understand is that if you're not experiencing that at all in your intimate relationships, and I have to say this, it's not just within our intimate relationships as husband, wife, or with a committed partner. I'm talking about any relationship. If you think about your mother, you think about your siblings or relatives or what have you, if there are no moments of intimacy where you share with that person, I really miss you, or that really meant a lot to me, or I know I have been distant, but I want you to know that I really care. If there's none of that ever, then there's nothing for the two people to rely on and to reference back to say, you know what, this is a worthwhile relationship. You know what, we've been struggling, but I remember that moment when we connected. And that is what I'm going to look to sustain me as we go through this difficult time. And so this whole piece you're talking about in terms of growing in vulnerability has to allow for the ups and downs, has to allow for the crazy moments and the moments of great distance and dissatisfaction, but also has to have spaces where you're touching in with one another so that the couple and individually and collectively have something to look at to say, okay, we do have the ability to do it, and I do feel something because I remember what she said last month. and how that made me feel, and so that's got to happen. That's got to happen. So I think it's a growth process, and realizing it can't all be good, but it also can't all be bad is really essential for people to understand in terms of understanding what it means to grow in vulnerability.
Good information, good information. Sports Nation, we are speaking with the Ma'at tonight. Our conversation is all about vulnerability. Great information has been shared. Guys, I have a couple questions that have come into the studio. I want to go ahead and get to them, and should time allow, we'll get back into the conversation. The first question that has come into the studio is coming from our Facebook family, and it's all about being able to be stable. Do you all see vulnerability being a place of stability within a relationship? What are your thoughts about that? Is the relationship stable if vulnerability is there?
Absolutely. I think that the vulnerability actually allows the relationship to become more solid and more stable. As a whole, the more you grow in your vulnerability. Because this is what it does. Vulnerability exposes you to somebody's weaknesses, but it also exposes you to somebody's strengths. And so if you know a person through and through, then what ends up happening is that you know when and how you can depend on that person. So you all become interlocked and intertwined in terms of your connectedness, and as a result, the relationship becomes stronger. If either one of you makes a choice, unfortunately, to use that vulnerability against the partner, then it can be definitely devastating to the relationship and it can dismantle everything. But if you use that vulnerability as a source of strength and you look at it as an avenue for you all to just solidify the bond, then it definitely can reinforce the stability in a relationship. We've experienced that in the couples that we've worked with, and we've also seen that as well. And it's not an easy thing, especially when it comes to dudes. We're less inclined to enter into that space of vulnerability. A lot of it's just based off of our upbringing and social conditioning. But once we do enter into that space of vulnerability, I have seen just in me working with men that it helps them to enhance their overall sense of self as they move closer to their spouse in the marriage.
Love that. Our next question that has come in is from a young lady in our Source Nation family, and she wants to talk about an incident that has taken place in her past. She says that she and her boyfriend have been together now 6 months. They have not been intimate, and she wants to, but she feels the need that she needs to tell him about something that has taken place in her past. How vulnerable should she be? What should she tell him?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, there's a couple of things that have to be really taken into consideration when we're thinking about, do we share with a partner, particularly a newer partner, someone who we're still learning and we're still learning, who's still learning about us. We got to really pause. And one of the things, I have to say this before, I get to that, is that one of the things that we find people tend to not do well is properly pace their relationships when it comes to, being with a new partner, and they are oversharing and not just oversharing their stories or intellectually or emotionally, but physically, all of that. So I think I'm glad to hear it's been 6 months and that she hasn't, done that, but she's feeling like she wants to get to that point. And so one of the things that I often tell folks is when you want to bring up something that is really, really kind of sacred to you, it's important to you, the person's response to you, would be very significant in terms of how much it impacts you and that kind of thing. Start out by simply just asking, the person, are they ready for that? And that might sound something like, I have something that I really want to share with you that was, perhaps you might use the word life-altering for me, life-changing, or really was a significant event in my past. And, I don't think I really, at this point, shared anything with you to that degree. And I just want to know, are you okay with that? Are you ready for that? I'm cool if you're not, because I want to make sure that that's something that you're even ready to hear from me about. And just putting that out there, even with that general question, sets the tone so the person knows, okay, you're setting this up because you're getting ready. You're not just dropping it on me. You're preparing me for something that is significant to you. And based on their response, they will either say, oh, wow, I'm just, I feel so honored that you've been going to, come to me like this. And if you want to share, absolutely, baby, come, let's talk. Or, maybe we should go out to eat. I'm coming over. Let's, how should we do this? Or there may be an awkward silence, or I don't know what you want to tell me, or I'm not sure. I'm not sure I really want to know. And all of that is information. My husband talked earlier about nonverbals. The verbals and the nonverbals, information for you as to whether or not they are ready, mature enough, able to hear what it is. This just the general kind of thing that you want to share. And from there, you just, continue on the conversation. So I would say for her, I don't know the specifics and that kind of thing. I don't know more about, her who her partner is and, her and herself. But absolutely, ask the question that, can I share something with you that's pretty significant for me? And then go from there and believe what they tell you.
Mm-hmm. Good information. Our next question that has come in, I believe it's a statement. It says, vulnerability requires you to love harder. You're opening yourself up to judgment and ridicule. What are your thoughts about that particular statement?
That's absolutely true. You are opening yourself up for judgment and ridicule. But again, I think that I know for a fact it is or should be a gradual process in a relationship. And in doing so, your partner, again, should treat your vulnerability delicately. They give you permission to open up and to continue to expose yourself, and you should do likewise. So in exposing yourself to judgment and ridicule, it's a natural part of growth. You can't grow without exposing it to yourself to some type of judgment or some type of criticism. You got to be willing to take the risk. So the reward is definitely there tenfold. But again, you have to go through that process of opening up, which is a beautiful thing.
I just want to add to that. Every time I've heard, I'll hear Oprah, say on one of her shows, I've heard her say several times, love doesn't hurt. True, genuine love, it doesn't hurt. And you deserve to be in a relationship where you're not experiencing, all this pain and confusing that with love. And I understand that, and I get that when we are truly residing in love can't be present along with hate and all that kind of stuff. But we have to remember when we think about this whole thing of opening ourselves up to ridicule and that kind of thing and judgment, we're all human beings. So none of us are operating authentically 100% of the time in a space of love. We're operating in love. We're operating in ignorance. We're operating in shame. We're operating in, best intentions. We're operating in all kinds of things and places that come from, our past or what have you, our histories. And so we come oftentimes with the best that we have to give, but the best that we have to give is oftentimes not good enough. So we have to be conscious and cognizant of the fact that once I open myself up, yes, ridicule is a possibility. But it doesn't mean that, this ain't love and this isn't it because you're causing me pain. That is a part of the process of being a human being and being in a relationship, that you're going to be with someone who's not going to cause you yummy feelings all the time. And you're going to do the same thing for them. So we just really need to see that that's a part of the process and not shut down and reject it and say, I'm not dealing with this person. I'm not dealing with no relationships. I'm not dealing with men or women or whatever anymore because they hurt me. That's a part of the process. That's a part of the process on some level. So we have to be discerning when we think about that.
I love that because I think, out of all of what we discussed tonight, I think you have to be completely open. And when I say that, you have to be emotionally, mentally, as well as physically. And I love the fact that we talked about embracing this area of your life. I think that is so very important. Not only that, vulnerability in the end truly teaches us the comfort with uncertainty. You have to be comfortable with that, Just as I said before, it is an area that people find it very difficult to do. And just as you said, you're not going to get it in one night. You're not going to get it in a year. It truly takes time. And the fact that you have to practice this is what's going to make it perfect. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you're 100% correct with that. You know, you definitely have to practice, and it definitely takes time. You can't, achieve success necessarily in anything that's worth fighting for overnight. So it requires you to invest the time, the energy, the effort, and the willingness has to be there for you to really experience that intimacy that you're looking for. You know, it can't be done without vulnerability. Trust has to be present. And one thing that I want to also emphasize too is that, when we speak about vulnerability, a lot of it's about, sharing your most authentic self and taking a risk and speaking your mind. But I just want to be clear that telling it like it is ain't always necessarily the way to go. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a high emotional intelligence when you're just speaking what's on your mind. So when it comes to relationships, definitely, you want to open yourself up to be able to speak your piece, but you want to do it with an element of delicacy because you're tending to your partner's heart. So just saying what's on your mind, that's not necessarily being vulnerable, because to some degree you actually could be doing some type of self-serving or self-gratifying action by just blurting out your piece. You have to be mindful of what's going on with your partner, circumstances, and just be very careful and diligent in how you tend to their heart when you speak your piece. But again, I think that authenticity is the way to go, but there's a certain technical or tactical way to approach it, and just saying what's on your mind isn't necessarily the most appropriate thing at all times.
I love that. So let me ask you, when you are counseling your couples or within your relationship coaching sessions, what are you finding when it comes to vulnerability? What are some of the things that you can share with us, if we are lacking in our relationship regarding this particular area? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, what we're finding most, and it's no big secret, but many of us, and I would dare to say nearly all of us, have trauma histories that we haven't necessarily come face to face with and really dealt with. And so when you're in a relationship, an intimate relationship with somebody, I mean, really it's a dance between two trauma histories. And so when you have two trauma histories interfacing, both of you are protecting yourselves because you're afraid to brush up against each other the wrong way and get hurt again. You don't want the wound to be opened up just one more time, so you're protecting yourself in a relationship. So whether it be the man or the woman in the relationship, what we've seen is that people are very guarded. People are very guarded and unwilling to take the risk because they were hurt 5 years ago, 10 years ago by a former relationship, whether it be with an intimate partner or whether it be with their mother or father. They're dealing with some deep-seated pain, and until they're able to actually confront that pain and deal with it, then they really negotiate and walk through the relationship very guarded and just protecting themselves. So we coach them through a process of entering into a space of safety and entering into a space of vulnerability, and just work with them around being transparent and also creating that safe space for their partner to be willing to open up and take the risk to expose themselves to them fully. But again, it's a journey. It's not an overnight process. It's a journey, but it's definitely well worth it if you're willing to let your guards down and take our hands and allow us to go on that journey with you.
Love that. I love that. As we are closing, I want to just talk a little bit more, if I can, in regards to vulnerability, maybe some steps that you have given your clients or you've shared in some of your coaching sessions, if you could share that with us tonight.
Okay, sure. We chuckle because one of the things that we often hear from folks once we have done our initial assessment with people, we 9 times out of 10 will make sure that we schedule out some individual time with folks, or the suggestion in terms of the plan is that you do some individual work with my husband, and I will do some individual work with the other partner, and then we're going to go down this journey and then come back together. And so we chuckle because people say, geez, we thought we were doing couples work and we just came to get some tools. We came to get, a few tricks and a few tips, give me some steps of what to do. And thought it would be better. But you all are trying to take us down this road of looking at ourselves and having all these individual sessions, and I ain't really come to do all of that. And so I'm saying all of this because it's leading me to the first and foremost step that is really important for people to take, and people often underestimate it and push it away. And I know personally, because I know I have in my past, and I think I still do. I mean, we all do on some level, depending on what the issue is. But that is that we can get tips and tricks and tools and step 1, step 2, step 3, but if I'm not motivated to do it, if I am stuck in a place where it is very difficult for me to do the things that I have been told are helpful, or to stop doing things that I have been told are not helpful, then that means there is some internal work that I have to do. And the only way to be able to get to that place where I can do those things is to sit with myself, with a third party, whether it be a coach or a counselor, whether you get a good self-help book, whatever it is, and really pay attention to what's happening for me emotionally. Because most change doesn't happen because people get step 1, 2, 3. It happens because there is an emotional transcendence that happens. There's a release. You know, people talk about, for example, forgiveness and how forgiveness releases you to be able to take the steps you need to take to move forward in your relationship more effectively. And so now you can take those steps, but you couldn't do it before because there was an emotional block or barrier. And so I just really think it's important for people to understand that if there is something that you know that you really haven't resolved in your past, or if you don't know what it is, but you keep having the same issue, the same problems, and you're the common denominator, you don't have 3, 4, 5 relationships, you keep having the same kinds of issues, then it would behoove you to really make sure that you get into some personal work. So that's step 1. And people go around it all the time. They don't want to do that. You can't change from the outside in. You got to do it from the inside out. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing I would like to say is that oftentimes when you're in a relationship, one partner is a little further along in terms of being willing to do some work with their partner, and the other person is not really feeling it, and that's common. What I would say is that the person who's willing and the person who has the insight and knows that we need to move forward and do some work has to stay committed to that. You have to keep it on the table. You have to not allow yourself to be influenced by the partner who continues to resist, and you can do that by going and starting to work on your own, and I've seen it happen time and time again. Eventually your partner will come with you, bringing it up over and over again, saying, hey, this is really important to me, but not just kind of taking a position of, well, he said he don't want to do it, so, and you find you hadn't brought it up in the last year. And so he don't even know that you're really for real about that thing because you hadn't brought it up for a year.